Hi, you've reached the Talking Racewalking podcast. It's all about racewalking, of course. It's talking to racewalkers from around the world about racewalking. Join me, Noel Payne, a amateur racewalker in Canada, as I talk to elites, Olympians, record holders, masters walkers, and anybody who's out walking as fast as they can. Hi, so this is a section where I'd actually be talking to someone, a race walker. So this is where you can come in. If you know a race walker, you're a race walker, and you have an amazing story, I want to hear from you. So reach out, let's chat, let's get walking and talking. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Talking Racewalking. Once again, I've gone down south of the border and I found a couple of younger race walkers, and that's not hard because I keep getting older, so there's a whole whack of people younger than me. So I've got Dean Freitag and Natalie Brammer here. They are both, well, I guess one is just slightly out of college, university, and the other one I do believe is still in those years. So welcome, Dean and Natalie.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love talking to race walkers and I love getting different perspectives. So to introduce our walkers today from the US, I've got Dan Freitag. From the information, Dean, not Dan, Dean, from the information I have, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, attended the University of Rio Grande, two-time national champion, five-time All-American. And I'm going to list off his impressive times for race walking. I've got 3K 12:33, 5K 21:45, and a speedy mile of 6:08. And then his companion today on the podcast is Natalie. She is a Shawnee State sophomore, so I'm not sure if that's accurate or if that was this year or last year, but still Shawnee State?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. And I see here as well that in the spring of this year, you set a 5,000 meter school record as well.
Yes.
Excellent. Very cool. So welcome on board. I'm going to get each of one of you to kind of tell me about how you started race walking. And Natalie, why don't we start with you? You're the younger of the two, and still, now do you call it a university or a college that you're at right now?
Either one.
Either one? Cool, excellent. Okay, so you're in that college university age, you're competing. How did you stumble across race walking, and how long have you been doing it?
I've been doing it for about 2 years now. I kind of stumbled on it randomly. I actually stumbled into running a bit randomly because I didn't start until my junior year of high school. So I didn't have any sort of plans going into college running, but I did. So my freshman year, we were going into track season and we were kind of all deciding what events we were going to do. And I didn't really have a specific event that I trained for. So Dean came to me and said, well, would you want to try race walking? And I'm like, sure, why not? So it was kind of all just history from there.
That's very cool. So yeah, so I think it's funny. I manage a couple of social media accounts, and it's funny when you get people who are very unfamiliar with the sport, it's very foreign to a lot of folks. So they don't, that one of the comments, why would you race walk if you can run? So what was it that interested you about race walking, or what got you to sort of keep doing it or give you a go?
Honestly, I liked that it was something different. I like that the form is very specific. It's not all about the speed. And I was just looking for anything that I could do to contribute points to my team. And I've enjoyed it a lot. And it kind of correlates with running really well. So I've liked being able to train for both.
No, that's cool. I think that's interesting. I think too, people that are newer to the sport or maybe are listening to this podcast who aren't race walkers, I think that's something that people aren't always aware of. Sometimes they're like, well, why don't you run? And I always sort of have that comment and go, well, some race walkers do run. It's not the only thing they do, or, it's vice versa. The two of them can complement each other in terms of, one uses the hamstrings a bit more, one uses the quads. It's different. One's technique. So I think they go well together. Do you find your race walking and running complement each other? Do you find it helps you run, or the running helps you race walk?
I think that they both help each other because we do a lot of lifting also and that target specific muscles for race walking, which also helps with my running as well. And then with our speed workouts that I do, I think the speed sessions, they're very interchangeable and help with both. And I've seen a lot of progress in both running and race walking since I've started.
That's cool. Yeah, I've often seen that especially some quicker paced stuff in running can actually help race walking because you've got that high turnover for race walking as well. So they go well together. And when you started race walking, what was the reaction? What did people think? I mean, is Shawnee State, is it somewhere where people are familiar with race walking, or do they kind of like give you a little bit of abuse, or are they supportive? What's was the reaction like?
Honestly, they were pretty surprised by it because I'm actually the first female race walker that Shawnee has ever had. They've had a couple males that have race walked, but I'm the first female. So they were definitely excited to see something different and get to see it because they really don't know anything about it.
That's cool. Yeah, and I think that's very common here and in the US in terms of there'll be a few hot spots where there's a few race walkers, and that otherwise you might be the only person at the school or the only person in your community who's out there race walking. So it does draw attention at times.
It does.
Yeah, excellent. So Dean, what's the
Yeah.
connection between you and Natalie? How did the two of you connect? Are you because you didn't go to Shawnee State, or did you also go to Shawnee State?
So actually, I went to school at University of Rio Grande, and I did my 4 years of undergrad and 2 years of master's school there. And my last year there of my grad program, I was a grad assistant coach, and Natalie had just started her freshman year at Rio Grande. She went there originally.
Okay, cool, very cool.
And after my head coach, Coach Willie, the man who taught me how to race walk, me and him were talking one day and saying things like she said, trying to figure out who fits where and what events on the team. And I told him, I was like, I just have a gut feeling that she could be good at race walking. Do you care if I teach her? And he goes, if you want to do it, I'll let this be your event group. You can coach it and teach it your way. I talked to Natalie and asked her if she wanted to race walk. And like she said, started working with her with that. Then after I graduated, finished my master's program, I'm finishing that up right now online. I got a job at Shawnee State, which is actually about 10 minutes from where you live.
Yes.
She to make the decision, which I'm grateful for because it helped build that athlete coach bond. And she decided to join me at Shawnee State.
No, very cool. That's a really cool story. So Natalie's been doing it for a couple years. How long have you been race walking, Dean?
I'm going into my 8th year, I believe, of race walk.
That's a good amount of time. And how did you stumble across the sport?
So all through high school, I was a distance runner. I kind of did a few field events or kind of whatever my team needed going in. But going into college, I had in my mind I wanted to be a steeplechaser, long distance runner because I had experience with some of those events. But at the end of my cross country season, I did what every normal freshman does and tried to push too hard coming back because I wanted to try to earn my keep with the upperclassmen. And I got hurt, wasn't able to race I was able to race most of indoor, but it was more race myself back into fitness.
Yep.
Outdoor season started getting in shape, but still wasn't to where I could be able to score in the 5K or 10K or anything like that with my team. And Coach Willie asked if I'd be willing to race walk to help the team because Rio's always had a good history of walkers. And I told him, of course. He taught me the basics of it, and just happened that it clicked and I went 25:30, I believe, my first time on the track with a 5K and qualified to the national meet.
Nice.
And I stepped off the track and Coach Willie said, yeah, you do this now.
I do think some of us tend to sort of have a sort of affinity for the sport. I was about the same. I did about a 25 first 5K as well. I think some people just tend to pick up the technique a bit quicker than others. It's different than running. And it's hard to explain to people that because often online people will see the elites doing race walking and will call it running because it looks so smooth. It's actually one of the comments I've had it's almost exhausting having to explain that it's not running. They'll see it and they'll say, oh, that's running. And I'm like, I think my trademark answer is now I want you to go out and try even 60 seconds of race walking and then come back to me and tell me it's running. It might look like it's running at the elite level, but I can guarantee it's not. It's got similarities, but yeah, it's definitely not running. So very interesting. So over those 8 years, you've gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
One of the other comments we often get too online is that race walking's only for runners that can't cut it. They go, you're not good enough, so you go try race walking. And I think there are some instances where that occurs, people like looking for another event to do. But I think we should, dispel this whole myth that it's for the people that, aren't good enough to run, that they're doing race walking. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty untrue. I mean, the level of athleticism and fitness and everything else required is pretty impressive. I mean, you are walking a 21-minute 5K. How did you go from 25 to 21? What was the progression and how did you get there?
So progression wise, I believe after my first year, I went 25. I got down into high 23s the next year. And then it was obviously the faster you get, the slower the progression is going to be. But I think the big thing that helped, and I still use this philosophy when I'm training Natalie, is we run a lot more than most race walkers will. It's about 50-50, whatever, what our training, because like you said, not all race walkers can't run. I had the privilege of, I still contributed to our team running wise. I was on our top 7 on our cross country team. I ran relays, 1500 steeple, stuff like that to help score at our conference. And Coach Willie, and like I said, I do this with Nat, we use the running workouts and races and meets to supplement as training for race walk. I would do a lot of 1500s and 800s to work on that turnover to carry over to it, or just to get extra fitness. Because we also look at it as, yes, getting race walking mileage is important, but the sad truth is the amount of time it's going to take to cover the same is more to race walk. So we will do a lot of running mileage to help get that number a little bit higher. One thing we've been is walk half of her long runs and then run the other half, just building up that endurance and tolerance to be able to walk longer, but still get the mile.
That's an interesting approach, because I've heard sort of varying degrees, and I know there's some people that are completely okay with that. I've come from a running background, so I do more race walking now, but I'm also older. And then I've also heard some coaches who don't think running necessarily is great for race walking. It's not as bad as a cross training, but 50-50 is a different approach. But I think, like anything, it's what works for you.
Yeah, definitely. And then, like she said, we also do a lot of strength training in the weight room. I myself, I have a degree in sports and exercise science, and I continue to try to study in that and make specific plans for myself and for her and any other race walker I work with to build up the muscles we need, because anyone that's race walked before, it burns muscles you didn't even know you had.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an adjustment period too for a lot of runners, going from, I don't know if you found this, Natalie, that you think you're fit, and you're definitely fit, you use all your running muscles, but when you start race walking, at first it feels fine, but for me, I found it definitely uses some different muscles. You got your shins, you rely on your hamstrings a bit more. Even stuff like the medial glutes are engaged more, that you don't use quite to the same degree. So did you find there was a bit of a shift after a while, or it was a bit of an adjustment?
I did. Definitely after going for longer distances, it burned a lot, and I had to get used to that and build up some muscle.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a shift. So for the two of you, it is summer here, it's summer there. Tell me about what your summer plans are, and then what your long-term race walk goals are. I'll start with you, Natalie. So relatively new, 2 years in. You've got a good solid start. And I'm looking at now that 5,000 record, 31:29 for 5K. What are your goals this summer, and where do you think you want to take your race walking?
This summer, I'm actually training for cross country. That's the main focus right now. But in the midst of it, since I've kind of taken a level up in my training with race walking in the past year, I'll also be incorporating more race walk training and a lot of form focus through the summer. And then I think we're planning on doing a race in September to get ready for the season. And that will be a road race for race walking. I believe Dean will be doing a 10K and I'll be doing a 5K. So we'll do that in the midst of cross country training, and then we'll go right into track season and jump right back into race walking full time.
That's cool. That's cool. I sort of, I think I'm definitely a proponent of mixing things up in the cross training, because, you know, where you've got a weakness in one, you can have a strength in another. So I think that's great. And have you had the midlife crisis that I did? What do you call yourself, a runner or a race walker, or do you just say both?
I say both. I would definitely that it depends on what I'm doing on the day. I'll go back and forth like, yeah, I'm a runner. Yeah, I'm a race walker. But I would definitely say that I'm both.
That's cool. Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're one of the few that is still 50-50. I had my midlife crisis, or I guess sport crisis, where I end up being more of a race walker than I was a runner. So, which is very strange for me after more than 30 years. So very cool. And Dean,
Yeah.
where are you now? You are at that line. You're really at that point in your training, where you're at that sort of national level, aiming for the next step up. What are your plans this year, and what are your big time goals?
So this year, obviously with this year being an Olympic year, everyone's focus is normally Olympic trials, trying to make the team, which was my goal. Training was going well, and unfortunately I tore my meniscus while I was training.
Oh,
The surgery to fix it was simple, and I'm I'm finishing up physical therapy right now, actually, and I get to start training here very soon. So I'm kind of looking for the near future. I want to get back to some speed work, get back to my roots of it being NAI. We do 3K, 5K. I want to kind of dip my toe back into that and really aim to place high at the U.S. Indoor Nationals this coming winter. Then continue to use that as a building block for 20K training. I want to finally get a good 20K in. I've had just unfortunate timing with it, with a meniscus injury. I tried to go to, as you're aware, race up in Canada last year. Just unfortunate travel plans on my part that didn't work for the race. And
it's all good. Yeah, we're farther away than you think.
Yeah. I mean, I attempted it once when I was young in college just to kind of get the experience of it, but it was nothing impressive. It was more of just a learning experience of a race. But I want to really get back into long distance racing and try to put my name in the ring to make U.S. teams, get some international experience, and hopefully really build up for 2028 and try to go after an Olympic spot.
That's cool. I'd love to see you do well. Now, here's a question for you guys as kind of a younger race walkers. The question has come up. It's in the news, especially with here in Canada. We've had Evan Dunphy, who's done really well, but has managed to move from the 50K event to the 20K event. Not everyone has managed to do that with success. There's a lot of athletes whose sort of dreams have basically ended because jumping down 30 kilometers to a shorter event is not in everybody's wheelhouse. They're not all capable. What are your thoughts on sort of where race walking is now? I think it's different in terms of the fact that you're both starting out. You both, never did a 50K event. The 20K is probably where you're thinking at the longest right now. With the 50K gone and this new relay event, where do you think race walking is going? Did the loss of the 50K have any effect on you? What did you think of it? Maybe I'll start with Natalie, a bit newer to the sport. The 50K wouldn't have even been on your radar really, but what do you think about the state of the sport? And what are your thoughts on this new relay?
I think that it is a very cool event. It's definitely more challenging, upping the distance in it. And I really like that it seems that race walking is becoming more known, specifically in this area. I don't think a lot of people knew about it, but since there are several race walkers that are around now, it's becoming more popular. And I think it will be cool for race walking to get more attention.
That's cool. I think that's a neat perspective. I think I think there's definitely a bit of an age split too, where I think a lot of people who were race walking for a while, the 50K is kind of like the race walking marathon. So I think it was a hit for them and a hit for the sport. But I think it's interesting for those newer to the sport or younger. The relay is viewed in a little more positive light, as maybe it'll bring a little more excitement. It's different. So that is interesting to hear. What about yourself, Dean? What are your thoughts on the 50K and the relay?
So originally when I first got started, the 50K always seemed like one that was interesting for me just because I'm always one that kind of likes the niche thing of like when I was realizing that I had a future in the race walk, I got to know it more. And it seemed like the 20K was the one that everyone focused on. It was a deeper thing. And I thought, okay, the 50K field's a little more open and it's a unique thing because not people know the marathon, they know a 5K. If you're really into running, you know how far 20K is, but no one ever thinks I'm going to do a 50K. But I knew it was brutal event wise, but I think adding the marathon the marathon relay is a great thing because like you said, it adds a little more excitement, especially having the male female teammate dynamic of it, trying to find the right pairings. One, I've always had I don't know if it'll ever happen. I thought it would be cool to do instead of having each person do 2 legs, do a 4-person relay. And especially in the US where we have a lot of talented short distance racers, I feel like it would and it also just worldwide gets more people involved in it, more people competing against each other. But I think it's a fun one. It gets people who maybe never thought about going up to 20K a chance to race that distance. I know me and Natalie have talked about hopefully long-term in her career trying to possibly team up together in a relay just as a cool mote for coach and athlete to try to race together where we normally don't get to.
I think that's a great idea because it just happened in Canada. So Evan Dunphy actually coaches Olivia Lundman.
Yeah,
they're actually going to the Olympics as coach and athlete. So I mean, it's definitely possible.
definitely.
So,
Yeah,
cool.
we got the pleasure of meeting Evan up there, and him and Olivia are great people, super nice, and I know me and her are both going to be cheering for them in Paris.
Yeah, and it's cool. I love hearing this. I think I was contacted recently about making a comment on about the loss of the 50K and the relay. And I said, I think the newer generation will probably not even know about the 50K, so it's not going to affect them. They won't even realize it's gone. And I think the relay is going to generate hopefully some attention and some positive news for the sport. I think there might be some problems in terms of, if you're racing a 10K, there's a lot more chance of lifting. There might be a little more scrutiny of that if people are racing really, really fast. Because the sport also does have that sort of controversial coming off the ground. Is it really walking if you're coming off the ground with 2 feet? People tend to, like we said before, call it running. But like you, I think we need to look at it as an opportunity to showcase the sport. And maybe we can drag back that 50K event. I think I was out with the race walk recently with a friend, and we talked about how the 20K and the 35K are really too close Often the people that win the 20K are also winning the 35K.
Yeah,
Where you usually didn't see that when there was a 20 and a 50. The 50K was more that strategic, dramatic event where there was moves. It required so much more endurance and mental strength. It was just a completely different event. And it went back to, I think, the roots of the sport. That that long walking. So yeah, I think I'm on board with you guys. So I think we have to look at it in a positive light, have fun with it, and then see if we can get support to maybe drag the 50K back perhaps at some point. So
yeah.
exactly. So last question for you, and this is one that has been bugging me here and there. I've been talking about it online. What shoes do you guys train in? Because it's one of the most common questions. I'm sure you guys get it too. What do you use to race walk? As if there's some sort of strange, bizarre shoe that we would use. There isn't really very many race walking shoes. We talk about, there's Reshod that Carmen makes in the US. Decathlon has the New Feel stuff, and then we've got the elites using super shoes now. What do you guys use on your feet to race walk? And what do you find It's a right way to phrase this. What do you find makes it easier for you to race walk? I'll start with Natalie. What do you use and what do you find works best for your race walking?
I use a pair of new feel shoes. I like those a lot because they are very lightweight and I'm able to feel whenever my heel is striking the ground so I can make sure that I'm staying within form. So I found a lot of success with using those.
Now, cool, dude. Now I'm a super shoe geek. So is it the 500 or the 900 you're using?
Five.
The
The
five.
five.
Okay, the really light sucker. The kind of the blue orangey one, really quite soft midsole and everything. Yeah, I've had that one as well. It's very light, very flexible. It's interesting. Yeah, because I've pretty much worn the gamut. So that's interesting. So for you, do you find that works better than just a running shoe for you?
I do because I felt like whenever I started in running shoes, that's what I used for a while whenever I first started race walking. But I found that I wasn't able to always tell whenever my leg was fully locked out just because I used some thicker shoes. I used Hoka's or Brooks, and a lot of times I just wasn't able to do the form as accurately. So I've liked that I've been able to use a lighter shoe.
Interesting. No, this is a good answer. And Dean, what do you have on your feet? And what are your thoughts on shoes?
I also wear new feels. I use the 900 just because I do some longer training stuff. But I'm the same. I really like how the thing I really like about them how flexible they are because I feel like I'm able to get a lot more ground contact time to generate power and just the way my form is. I really like the feel of it. I started out in a pair of just really thin Mizunos that I had, like flats basically.
Yep.
And then just over getting to know people in the race walk world, learned about new feel and transition to that. And it's one of those, we tell people on the team here at Shawnee State all the time, once you switch to a pair of shoes that are made for race walking, you never want to go back just because the feel is so much more smooth.
That is, it's a very interesting comment, and I've had the new feel guys. For people who are listening, it's made by a store called, well, they're sold at a store called Decathlon, which is in a lot of countries. Unfortunately, the new feel shoes are usually hard to find. They used to be in Canada, now they went gone. You might be able to find them online. I think in the US and elsewhere, you can sort of track them down. But yeah, and they usually have a 500 lighter model, a 900. There's a 900 long distance version. And
Yeah.
there was a purple version for the Tokyo Olympics that I have a pair of as well that are kind of fun. But yeah, they are designed for race walking. They're kind of that almost zero drop, fairly moderate cushion in terms of not thick at the heel or anything, no, and flexible. I like them. It's not my favorite race walking shoe, but I have used them. What are your thoughts on, and this will be the last one before we tie things up. What are your thoughts on the super shoes now? Because like you guys, even if I'm not using new feel, I use like Saucony Kinvera or an Asics like Hyperspeed. And it's still, it's not much of a drop. It's still fairly low profile, nice rocker. What about the super shoes? I'm still trying to get my head around how that works for the elites. I've talked to a bunch of them. What are your thoughts on the elites using super shoes? Have you ever had a pair on and tried to race walk in them?
Personally, I have super shoes that I've ran in. I really like them for running. I think they're great asset for it. I've goofed around and tried to walk in them. I just can't get the feel for it because most of them tend to have a lot thicker cushion and I feel unbalanced on it. And I just don't feel like I get the same. It's a different kind of reaction with the carbon fiber plate than you do just naturally getting the bend and getting to use your foot and feel it.
Yep, that makes sense. Actually, I'm hoping to do a little a YouTube video on that, just talking about that whole thing. I've talked to a few of the elites, and I guess it's quite a transition going over because most of those super shoes do have that thick heel, soft heel that compresses so much. So you come down at the heel, you're going to compress a lot. And then you've got that carbon fiber plate that you have to sort of get up over. And then you've got the rocker at the front. So it's changing the biomechanics and what your legs are doing. So
Definitely.
It must work, but yeah, it's definitely not comfortable for me to use either. So
I've also this is me personally. I know some people like it. I've just never been a fan of walking with the shoes that have the point at the end just because I feel like it throws you off balance and you strike it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I've come to a conclusion with, whether running or race walking. I've done a lot of research and been doing this for a long time. Is comes down to what works for you. Everybody's foot is different. Everybody's technique, you weigh different, whole bunch of these things. So ultimately it's what seems to work best for you. But it's interesting that you guys are going back to the shoes that traditional race walkers would say would be the type that work for race walking. So I think that's cool. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on board, geeking out with me for a few minutes on race walking. What is one bit of advice you would have as we let you go for younger race walkers looking to take up the sport? Natalie, I'll give it to you. And then Dean, leave me with like 1 or 2 sentences in terms of what would you advise someone?
My biggest advice would probably be stick with it, because it is very difficult and different at the beginning when you're trying to learn an entire new form, because whenever you're running, nobody's ever looking at your form and saying, oh, you're not doing it right, or holding up a paddle or anything like that. So that can be very different to adjust to. So I would say definitely stick with it, work hard, and you can do great things in race walking.
I love it. Thank you. And Dean, what would you tell someone as an athlete, as a race walker and a coach? What advice would you give someone just getting into it, or a younger race walker?
Very similar. It's one of those, it's not going to feel right the first time you do it. It's going to feel unnatural, but to stick with it, and for my personal experiences, don't care what anyone else thinks. It's going to look goofy. You're going to feel dumb the first time you do it, but if you like it, stick with it and give it everything you have, and it's going to pay off.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. I think race walking is badass. Sometimes I think people are always looking to be different, but by being different, they just do what everybody else is doing. Race walking is different. It's unique. I think people should be proud of it. Thank you for coming on board and talking with us, guys. And happy walking. And we'll touch base later and see how the training's going and how close you're getting to your goals.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Take care.
That's it, folks. It's the end of the podcast. No walkers have been harmed in the recording of this podcast. And of course, at the moment, we have no sponsors or supporters at this point to fund all this amazing podcasting. But if you're out there and have a race walk company that produces some sort of race walk apparel product, or something you think race walkers would love, get hold of us. We'd love to have you on board. Give us a holler.